This is the story of Dr. Sophia Rain, a brilliant 30-year-old doctor dedicated to saving lives. One fateful night, after collapsing in the ER during a grueling shift, Sophia found herself crossing into a realm she never believed existed. There, she encountered Jesus, whose presence radiated love and truth. But what he showed her was far from comforting. Jesus revealed the terrifying truth about how fear and manipulation could one day lead humanity into accepting the mark of the beast. Now back among the living, Sophia feels compelled to share what she witnessed, a warning and a call to action for us all. It started as an ordinary, if exhausting, night for Dr. Sophia Rain. The ER was buzzing with activity. A child with a fever, a car accident victim clinging to life, and a man struggling to breathe after weeks of neglecting a cough that turned into pneumonia. Sophia moved from patient to patient, her mind sharp despite the physical toll of back-to-back shifts. Sophia loved her work. Growing up in a small town in the Midwest, she'd always dreamed of becoming a doctor. She was known for her compassion, often staying late to hold a patient's hand or explain a diagnosis in simpler terms. But the strain of the pandemic, the growing number of mysterious illnesses, and the lack of resources were wearing on her. That night, she began to feel unwell. At first, it was just a pounding headache and a tightness in her chest. She brushed it off as stress and dehydration, drinking a quick sip of water before rushing to her next patient. But as the hours passed, her symptoms worsened. By the time she finished stitching up a young woman's hand, her vision had begun to blur. "I just need a moment," she thought, leaning against the counter in the break room. But her body had other plans. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the floor. Her colleagues rushed to her side, their faces a blur as darkness enveloped her. Sophia's next memory wasn't of the hospital or her coworkers. She opened her eyes, or at least it felt that way, and found herself in a place she couldn't describe. It wasn't the hospital, nor was it a dream. It was a realm of light, warmth, and peace so profound it felt like every burden she'd ever carried had been lifted. "I must be dreaming," she thought, but the clarity of her surroundings made that impossible. The light wasn't blinding. It seemed to emanate from everywhere and everything. Colors she couldn't name danced in the air, and a gentle hum filled her ears, a sound she later described as the universe breathing. As she took in her surroundings, Sophia noticed that she felt no fear, no pain, only an overwhelming sense of love and acceptance. It was as if this place knew her, not just the parts of her she was proud of, but the parts she hid from others, even herself. And yet, it welcomed her without judgment. Then she sensed it, a presence unlike anything she'd ever encountered. It was both familiar and awe-inspiring, a force of pure love and wisdom. She turned toward the presence, her heart racing with a mix of wonder and reverence. Before her stood Jesus, his eyes filled with compassion, his very being radiating a warmth that felt like home. Sophia could barely speak as she stood before Jesus. She had grown up attending church sporadically, but had never been deeply religious. Her life had been rooted in science and reason. And yet here she was, standing in the presence of someone she instinctively knew to be the source of all truth. "Why am I here?" she managed to whisper, her voice trembling. Jesus smiled, a gesture that seemed to fill her with courage. "Because you have questions," he said, his voice gentle yet powerful. "And there is much you need to see." Sophia felt tears streaming down her face, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming sense of being fully known and fully loved. She wanted to ask so many things. Was she dead? Would she see her family again? But before she could speak, Jesus extended his hand, and the world around her began to shift. In an instant, Sophia was no longer in the realm of light. She found herself standing in a vision of the world she had left behind. Hospitals were overcrowded, people were fearful, and the air seemed heavy with tension. Jesus stood beside her, his gaze steady. "This is your world," he said, "but it is also a reflection of what it could become." The first thing Sophia noticed in the vision was the sheer exhaustion on the faces of her fellow healthcare workers. She saw herself among them, moving from patient to patient with a determined but weary expression. The hospitals were stretched beyond their limits, not just from known diseases, but from mysterious new illnesses that seemed to appear without warning. "Why is this happening?" Sophia asked, turning to Jesus. "Because the balance has been broken," he replied. "Humanity has forgotten its connection to creation, to one another, and to me. The consequences are sickness, fear, and division." Sophia watched as the vision unfolded, showing communities struggling to care for their sick and vulnerable. She saw leaders debating policies that prioritized profits over people, and the growing frustration of those who felt abandoned. Yet, amidst the chaos, she also saw acts of extraordinary compassion. Nurses staying late to comfort patients, neighbors delivering meals to the homebound, and strangers praying together in hospital lobbies. "This is both the problem and the solution," Jesus said. "Love and unity can heal what fear and division destroy. But first, humanity must choose." The vision shifted, and Sophia saw the earth from above, its beauty marred by scars of pollution and destruction. Jesus explained how humanity's disregard for the natural world had created imbalances, leading to the emergence of new and more dangerous viruses. "These illnesses are not punishments," he said. "They are warnings, opportunities to remember your responsibility as stewards of creation." Sophia watched as images of industrial pollution, deforestation, and overcrowded cities flashed before her eyes. Then she saw people working together to reverse the damage, planting trees, cleaning rivers, and finding sustainable ways to live. Jesus emphasized that these efforts, though small, could grow into a global movement of restoration and healing. But the most striking part of the vision was what came next. Sophia saw how fear of these illnesses could be used to manipulate people, to pit them against one another, and erode their freedoms. Jesus warned her that without vigilance and faith, humanity could lose its way, choosing control over compassion and convenience over connection. The vision shifted again, and Sophia found herself standing in a crowded city square. People were gathered around large screens displaying updates about a new, fast-spreading virus. The atmosphere was thick with fear. Faces were tense, and whispers of panic filled the air. Families clung to each other, their eyes darting nervously toward the screens. Jesus pointed toward a man speaking on the screen, a leader urging people to follow strict measures for their safety. His words seemed reasonable at first, but as Sophia listened more closely, she noticed an underlying tone of control. "For your protection," the man repeated over and over, as if trying to convince not just the crowd but himself. "This is how fear becomes a weapon," Jesus said. "It begins with concern, but unchecked, it grows into something far more dangerous: control." Sophia watched as people complied with increasing restrictions, their fear of the unknown overshadowing their ability to question. It wasn't just government mandates. Businesses, institutions, and even neighbors began enforcing the rules with an intensity that turned suspicion into division. Those who questioned the measures were labeled dangerous, their voices drowned out by the chorus of compliance. Sophia's heart ached as she saw how fear fragmented communities. Families argued, friendships broke apart, and trust eroded. But amidst the chaos, Jesus showed her a small group of people who resisted the tide. They didn't resist out of defiance but out of love. They helped their neighbors, shared resources, and spoke with compassion, reminding others of the importance of unity. "Fear divides," Jesus said, "but love unites." Sophia's vision darkened, and she found herself in a sterile, brightly lit room. People stood in line, waiting to receive what looked like a small device implanted in their hands. A man at the front of the line hesitated, asking the worker administering the implants if it was truly necessary. The worker replied calmly, "It's for your convenience and safety. Everyone is doing it." Sophia felt a chill as she realized what she was witnessing. Jesus explained that this wasn't about a physical mark, but a deeper symbol of surrendering free will to fear and manipulation. The mark of the beast is not just a device or a physical sign, he said. It is the acceptance of control over freedom, fear over faith, and division over unity. Sophia saw how people justified their decision to accept the mark, believing it was necessary to function in society. Without it, they couldn't buy food, access healthcare, or travel. Yet those who resisted found themselves ostracized, labeled as dangerous and irresponsible. "What can stop this?" Sophia asked, her voice trembling. "Faith, courage, and the refusal to compromise love for comfort," Jesus replied. "The mark is not inevitable, but it requires vigilance to resist." The vision shifted again, showing how the mark became a part of daily life. Sophia saw advertisements promoting the implant as a symbol of progress. "Join the future," the slogans read, depicting smiling families and efficient transactions. It seemed harmless at first, even beneficial, but as Sophia looked deeper, she saw the darker side. In her vision, those who refused the mark faced increasing hardships. Employers fired them, landlords evicted them, and they were denied basic services. Friends turned their backs, fearing association with the unmarked. Sophia felt their isolation deeply, but she also saw their resilience. Jesus explained that the enforcement of the mark wouldn't come through violence, but through coercion. "It will be sold as convenience, as safety," he said, "and many will accept it without questioning, not realizing what they are surrendering." Sophia saw leaders and corporations working together to normalize the mark, using fear of viruses and instability as justification. But she also saw a growing movement of people who resisted, choosing faith and unity over control. Their resistance wasn't easy. They faced ridicule and hardship, but their courage inspired others to question and resist as well. Sophia found herself standing in a small church filled with people who had chosen to resist the mark. They prayed together, their voices filled with both desperation and hope. Jesus explained that the future depended on choices made not by governments or corporations, but by individuals. "Every person has the power to choose," he said, "even in the face of fear, even when the cost is high." Sophia saw how small acts of courage, refusing to judge, standing up for the oppressed, and choosing compassion over convenience, created ripples of change. These choices, though difficult, became the foundation for a stronger, more unified humanity. She watched as families came together to support each other, communities formed networks of mutual aid, and people rediscovered the strength of their faith. Jesus emphasized that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. The vision shifted one final time, showing the dual nature of technology in humanity's future. Sophia saw advancements that brought incredible benefits: diseases cured, resources shared efficiently, and communication made seamless. But she also saw how the same tools could be used for harm when wielded without ethics. Sophia watched as technology became a means of monitoring and controlling people, tracking their movements and decisions. Jesus explained that technology itself wasn't evil, it was a tool, and its impact depended on the intentions of those who used it. "Wisdom is the key," he said. "Use technology to heal, to connect, to uplift, not to dominate." Sophia saw a vision of what could be. Scientists working hand in hand with faith leaders to ensure that technology served humanity's highest values. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, realizing that her role as a doctor wasn't just about healing bodies, but also guiding hearts and minds toward ethical choices. The vision shifted, and Sophia found herself looking at two parallel realities, one where humanity was divided and another where it was united. In the first, people were isolated, distrustful of one another. Communities broke down as individuals prioritized their own safety and survival over the well-being of others. Families splintered, neighbors turned on each other, and the world became a cold, lonely place. In the second vision, unity shone brightly. Communities worked together, sharing resources, supporting the vulnerable, and standing firm against forces that sought to divide them. Technology was used ethically, providing solutions to pressing problems without infringing on people's freedoms. Faith, science, and compassion worked hand in hand, bridging gaps that once seemed insurmountable. This is the choice humanity must make, Jesus said. Division or unity, fear or love. The path forward depends on the decisions each person makes. Sophia was struck by how small acts, kindness, forgiveness, and courage could ripple outward, transforming the collective future. She saw how individuals could inspire others to choose connection over separation and hope over despair. Jesus then showed Sophia what happens when humanity becomes complacent. She saw people growing weary of constant vigilance, choosing comfort and convenience over critical thinking and action. In this vision, complacency allowed harmful systems to take root unnoticed. Leaders who once promised freedom began to prioritize control, and citizens, lulled into a false sense of security, didn't question the changes. Sophia watched as freedoms eroded, not through force, but through subtle, incremental decisions. Small compromises led to larger ones until people realized too late that they had lost their autonomy. Jesus explained that complacency isn't just an action. It's a failure to recognize the significance of every choice. You must remain awake, he said. Faith and love require effort, and the cost of ignoring this truth is far greater than the discomfort of vigilance. Sophia felt the weight of this warning and understood that maintaining unity, compassion, and freedom required ongoing commitment. It wasn't a one-time battle, but a lifelong journey. In the next vision, Sophia saw people turning to faith during times of uncertainty. It wasn't about religion in the traditional sense, but a deeper connection to something greater than themselves. She saw individuals from diverse backgrounds coming together in prayer, meditation, and acts of service, finding strength and guidance in their shared humanity. Sophia realized that faith wasn't about having all the answers. It was about trusting in love, hope, and the power of unity. Jesus explained that faith, when combined with action, was humanity's greatest defense against fear and manipulation. Faith gives you the courage to resist, he said. It reminds you of your worth and the worth of others. Sophia saw families praying together, communities supporting each other through challenges, and people rediscovering their spiritual connection. She felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that even in the darkest times, faith could be a beacon of light. Jesus then revealed a vision of what the world could look like if humanity chose love and unity. Sophia saw communities flourishing, with people working together to solve problems and support one another. Hospitals were well-staffed and equipped, not because of government mandates, but because individuals had chosen to prioritize care and compassion. She watched as families mended broken relationships, neighbors shared resources, and people treated each other with kindness and respect. There was still work to be done, but the foundation of unity made every challenge feel surmountable. In this vision, Sophia saw herself leading initiatives to bring healthcare and education to underserved areas. She worked alongside others who had chosen to dedicate their lives to healing, not just of bodies, but of minds, hearts, and communities. This is the future that love can build, Jesus said. It begins with one person, one choice, one act of courage. The vision turned to leadership, showing both the best and worst of what leaders could become. Sophia saw leaders who used their power to unite, listening to their people, fostering dialogue, and putting the needs of the vulnerable first. These leaders were humble, acknowledging their mistakes and striving to do better. But she also saw leaders who sought control, using fear to manipulate and consolidate power. They made decisions not for the good of the people, but to maintain their own positions. Jesus explained that leadership was a reflection of the people who chose it. A leader's power comes from those who follow, he said. Choose wisely. Sophia realized that leadership wasn't just about those in high positions. It was about every individual who inspired others through their actions. She saw teachers guiding students with empathy, parents nurturing their children with love, and community organizers bringing people together. Leadership, she understood, was about serving others. Sophia saw what could happen if humanity ignored the warnings Jesus had shown her. In this vision, fear ruled. People turned inward, focusing only on their own survival. Communities dissolved, trust vanished, and the forces of control grew stronger. The world became a place of scarcity, not because resources were lacking, but because compassion was. Sophia felt the weight of this vision and asked Jesus, "How can we prevent this?" "With faith, courage, and action," he replied. "Every choice matters." In the next part of the vision, Sophia saw what could happen if humanity ignored Jesus' warnings. The world appeared bleak, a shadow of its former self. People had grown apathetic, allowing fear to dictate their choices. Leaders who once seemed benevolent tightened their grip, using technology and societal pressure to enforce compliance. Sophia witnessed families separated by distrust and communities fractured by fear. Basic freedoms, like speaking one's mind, moving freely, or choosing a different path, were slowly stripped away. Most didn't even notice, having traded these freedoms for the illusion of safety and convenience. Jesus stood beside Sophia, his face filled with sorrow. "This is the cost of inaction," he said, "when love is replaced by fear and unity by division. Humanity loses not just its freedom but its soul." Sophia felt a deep sense of urgency. She realized that the warnings weren't just about avoiding the mark of the beast, but about protecting the very essence of what makes humanity divine: free will, love, and compassion. Suddenly, the vision stopped, and Sophia found herself surrounded by warmth and light. Jesus looked at her with a mixture of love and seriousness. "It's not your time," he said. "You have work to do." Sophia felt a jolt, as though she were being pulled backward. The light faded, replaced by the sterile fluorescent glow of the hospital. Her chest heaved as she gasped for air, her senses overwhelmed by the sounds of beeping monitors and frantic voices. She blinked, her eyes focusing on the faces of her colleagues, who stood frozen in disbelief. "She's back," one of them exclaimed. Tears streamed down their faces as they rushed to her side. Sophia felt weak, but her mind was clear, filled with the memories of what she had seen. The experience was vivid, undeniable. She knew she couldn't keep it to herself. It wasn't just a vision. It was a message, a mission. As Sophia recovered, she began to share her story. At first, she hesitated, unsure if people would believe her. But as she spoke, her sincerity and passion won over even the most skeptical listeners. She wasn't trying to convince anyone to adopt her beliefs. She simply wanted them to think, to reflect, and to choose wisely. Her story spread, inspiring others to examine their lives and priorities. Families who had been divided by fear began to reconcile. Communities came together to support each other, creating networks of trust and compassion. Sophia's message wasn't just about avoiding a dystopian future, it was about building a better one. Sophia also transformed her approach to medicine. She prioritized education, helping patients understand not just their illnesses, but also the broader context of health, community, and resilience. She advocated for ethical practices in medicine and technology, reminding her colleagues of their responsibility to serve humanity with integrity. Sophia's story ends not with a conclusion, but with a call to action. Standing before an audience of doctors, patients, and families, she speaks with a conviction that comes from her profound experience. "This isn't just my story," she says. "It's a story about all of us. We're at a crossroads, and the choices we make now will shape the future for generations to come. Will we choose love or fear? Unity or division? Freedom or control?" She urges her listeners to remain vigilant, to question what they are told, and to always prioritize compassion over convenience. Faith, courage, and love are our greatest defenses against fear, she says, but they require action. Every act of kindness, every moment of forgiveness, every decision to stand up for what's right. These are the seeds of a better future. Sophia's plea resonates deeply. Inspiring those who hear it to reflect on their own lives and choices, she leaves them with one final thought. The future isn't written. It's waiting for us to decide. Choose wisely. Choose love.